Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Houtz. I am a consultant with Momentum Incorporated in Pennsylvania, in the Harrisburg area in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. Today, we're going to be talking about leveraging rapid responses in a post-pandemic world. So, as we are still dealing with the coronavirus pandemic as a nation and as a world, how do we respond to that pandemic? So, as this applies to our individual personal lives, but also our work lives. So how do we handle these projects moving forward? When the pandemic hit, we were all forced to rapidly change things overnight. Organizations were initiating rapid responses, including building hospitals, shifting some production to make more hand sanitizer and masks, responding to statewide lockdowns, and quickly standing up any tools or technology that we could use to track the virus or the response to that virus. Each of these changes do require key project management activities in order to be successful. So what can we learn from these changes, and how can we take those changes that we've been accustomed to over the last year or so? How do we incorporate them into our projects as we move forward? There's really 10 key takeaways to this presentation today. You want to plan for success. Obviously, you don't plan for failure, you plan for success. So as a project manager, that's key. We want to remain flexible because change is constant, change is always happening, it's inevitable. So you either embrace change or you try to avoid change. We need to work with what we have. That goes in reference to resources, whether it's personnel on your project, whether it's tools that you have to do your job, whatever they may be. It could be hardware, software, any of that. We need to look at all those resources that we have available to us. As a project manager, you always want to set expectations. What level of quality are you looking for? Obviously, you want high level of quality for your products, whatever that product might be. You want to trust and empower your team. If you don't trust your team to do their job, odds are you're not going to be successful. Building your team is another crucial step, and that in the virtual world today, that can be a little more difficult actually, because we're all working remotely in our homes, maybe across the state, across the United States, or even the world. So trying to build that project team that can be successful is key. Lead by example. Use this same sentence in your personal lives if you're a parent as you would use in your work lives as a project manager. Or maybe you're a lead developer on your project. You always want to lead by example. We want to communicate, obviously. That's one of the number one things as a project manager, is making sure communication happens, the right channels being used, the right method of communication is being used, whether it's an email, whether it's a face-to-face meeting, whether it's a phone call, or maybe it's a written letter. Knowing what the method of communication is and how that communication should happen is also key to success. Focusing on the outcomes, so not always the process. Sometimes it doesn't matter as much how you get there, as long as we get there and we are successful on our projects. Planning for success. Whether it's a COOP, a disaster recovery plan, or a project plan, knowing what everyone should be doing in the event of an emergency is vital to continued success. So with rapid projects, this planning can be expedited and only needs to be done at the level of detail needed for the team to start working. You hear that term of rolling wave planning, that's what we're talking about here. Only trying to plan for what's just ahead in phase one instead of trying to plan that entire project in one sitting. And if the end goal is still a moving target, start with the work that can be done while you're planning out the rest. Of course, there's always risks. You have to manage those risks. They're often documented in that risk register, but it's also good to have that risk management plan. That should always be a routine part of each of your projects, because you need to know what those risks are and how um, those risks can be responded to in your risk response plan. So just like a COOP or a disaster recovery plan, having that risk management plan um, can expedite those responses to those risks so they don't turn into a major issue in your project. Remain flexible. Change is constant. We're always evolving, whether we like it or not. So do you fight change or do you embrace it? Embracing change and being ready to adapt your approach should be required or is encouraged to be required on your projects. Agile methodology definitely lends itself to this concept of change. Having the ability to incorporate change is one of the core beliefs of this methodology. But even if you're using waterfall approach, you can adapt your waterfall into to create more of a hybrid approach to your projects. You may need to adjust your planning or incorporate a more iterative process, but it can be done. And this doesn't mean that the change has to be chaotic. So even with Agile, you still need a mechanism for incorporating changes and making sure everyone's understanding the full impact of that change, whether it's a shift in the schedule or it's a change in the cost. Work with what you have. You want to mold your team, enhance their skills, so you may not have a full-time business analyst working on your project. You may not get a developer who can code the perfect system in his or her sleep. Stop lamenting over what you don't have and build a plan around what you do have. If your resources aren't fully allocated to the project, look for ways to rework the plan and shift some responsibilities so tasks can still be completed. You can do some fast tracking on your project, maybe do some things in parallel. If you have teams that don't have the right expertise, maybe you can allot some time for them to get some training to get them up to speed on that new technology or that new tool. You may have some other team members on your team that can mentor those folks and provide guidance and coaching. If you're working with tools and technology that don't quite fit what you're trying to do, can you make them, can you adapt those and make them work for your project? It may not be as convenient, but you can create a project schedule in Microsoft Excel or some other spreadsheet software. If you don't have access to Microsoft Project, you could also create a flow chart in PowerPoint if you don't have Microsoft Visio at your fingertips. So some tools will be absolutely essential, but with some creativity and flexibility, you can make those other tools that you have available to you work on your project. So reuse or adapt those tools. Set expectations. Scope, time, quality. Of course, that's the triangle that we're working with in project management. How many times has a team member completed a task only as you find out that when you get that deliverable, it doesn't meet the requirements? Maybe a business analyst is gathering requirements and wasn't detailed enough in a requirement, or maybe they missed a feature that was needed. Or maybe the developers delivered code to you and it has so many defects in it that it's almost impossible to work with that code. The reality is that happens. Just make sure folks know what they're supposed to do, when it's needed, when it needs to be done, and the level of quality that's being expected is key for your team. Keeps everybody on the same page. Trust. Trust and empower your team. Give your trust first. Provide them with some guidance on what is needed. So prior to the pandemic, we all heard objections to remote work and telework, and management and company executives, they weren't keen on having their workers all working from their homes. They thought that productivity would decrease dramatically, but instead, we've actually seen the opposite. Some studies have now shown that productivity has increased with people working from home. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that workers aren't forced to jump in their cars and commute to work every day. So that extended commute time can be draining. So we're actually seeing those productivity increasing. Amazing things happen when you demonstrate trust in your team. They want to do a good job for you. Their engagement goes up, their productivity increases. Trust your team to do their jobs and to do them well. You don't need to micromanage your project team members to achieve the results you're looking for. I know we've all worked with leaders who want full control of every aspect of our project. If you're trying to move quickly, that approach can quickly lead to burnout on projects. Not every decision needs to be made via a committee. So maybe some smaller decisions about your project can be made by a single team member. Maybe the lead developer or the lead business analyst, or just maybe a subset of that. Maybe just the developers get together and make a decision and take that to the project manager. And that's a good approach and help streamline things a little bit. Let team members make and run with the decisions whenever they can. Obviously, this has to come with some controls, but the key to speed is ditching that committee approach whenever you can. As long as they understand the project and everyone shares the same expectations, your team members will have some great ideas. Ask for their input, encourage that open communication. Make sure your door is always open to new ideas that could streamline and make your project better. This approach is going to yield some great ideas and will show people that it's okay to raise potential problems before they become real problems or real issues on your project. So keeping those lines of communication open. Grow your team. We're all familiar with your project manager, that Tuckman's ladder, that the different phases of our project as we're forming a team and growing that team to that performing stage. For anyone that started a new project in the middle of the pandemic, you know that building a team is more difficult when the team members are dispersed. So focus on building the team and helping them progress through the stages of group formation. So you may need to put in more work to achieve this than you normally would, but the results are definitely worth it. A performing team is always a team that produces quicker and better results. So if you want your projects to run smoother and faster, grow your team to the point where they're performing. If you invest in your team, that investment is going to pay off for your project. Lead by example. When you want your team to keep you in the loop on something, start keeping them in the loop. If you want your team to be on time so meetings can start immediately, start being on time yourself. So whatever behavior you want the project team to display needs to be embraced and modeled by you. And that goes for our personal lives as well. As if you're a parent, we always want to try to lead by example. Communication, of course, is key in the era of Zoom, instant messages and endless emails. We found out one critical thing: nothing really replaces a face-to-face meeting or a brainstorming session. But project managers need to focus on maintaining communication with the team and ensuring that all the members are kept in the loop. You can use tools now like Microsoft Teams to help collaborate that as we're all working remotely. And share updates as much as you can because your team will thank you for that. Focus on the outcomes. As long as your team members are available for meetings and they complete their tasks on time and on quality, how and when they work doesn't really matter. So if they have the flexibility to work after hours to complete a task, I would say let them do that if at all possible. Give them their tasks and let them choose how to get those completed. By focusing on the outcomes they achieve rather than the process, you'll keep the focus on the work itself and demonstrate your trust in your project team. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you again. My name is Matthew Houtz, Senior Consultant with Momentum Incorporated in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. My email address is there. If you'd like to reach out to me, feel free to do so. Thank you very much.